A lot to discuss, no question here, so I do want to bring in Joe Truzman, Senior Research Analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's Long War Journal. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Pleasure.
All right, so first off, I do want to get your overall assessment. Obviously, there is still a lot left to figure out, a lot of unknowns, but what are your initial thoughts here as we learn about Israel's retaliatory strikes there on Iran?
Right. So I think what Israel accomplished overnight, or rather what Israel accomplished its goals overnight, I think it was a limited operation. I believe that Israel could have struck more areas or military sites in Iran, but it kept the operation to about approximately, at least according to reports, about 20 sites. And honestly, it doesn't surprise me. We have to understand here that Israel has been in a multi-front conflict for over a year now. It is conducting a major operation in Gaza, a major operation in southern Lebanon, and also there are West Bank armed terrorist organizations that it is dealing with. And obviously, we still have Iraqi militias firing at Israel. We have the Houthis in Yemen firing at Israel. So I believe the military is pretty. Israel's military is stretched right now and has been for a year. However, they are being successful, which is the good news for them. But again, I think this operation in Iran was limited because of the reasons that I mentioned just a few moments ago.
And do you think the U.S. played a role there in why we didn't see nuclear sites being hit there over in Iran?
Yeah, I think at least, from the beginning, right, the United States warned there'd be severe consequences if Iran attacked Israel, and Iran did. So there's been hints of American involvement here. We know that they sent defense systems to Israel, specifically the THAAD. But I also believe that there was advisement by the Biden administration to the Israelis saying, hey, listen, we know you need to defend yourself, but we would like you to stay away from nuclear facilities and, of course, oil refineries. So I think the Netanyahu administration understood that. And I think, and I do believe the Israelis kept this operation, their strikes rather, limited to military sites in Tehran, or rather in Iran.
And I did kind of want to ask your thoughts here, because we know that Iran has said, we're not going to respond to this unless we do have a situation where there's extensive damage or you have injuries or deaths. And we did learn from Iran, reports coming out of there, that 2 Iranian soldiers at least died in those strikes. So what do you think of a possible retaliation from Iran, retaliating for the retaliation by Israel? Do you think that is going to happen?
At least initially. Now we're about 13 hours or so after the strike. From what I've read in Iranian state-controlled media, it appears that we're seeing a lot of downplaying of the Israeli strikes, which is actually kind of good news. And we're not seeing a lot of threats, right, or violent rhetoric coming from the regime in Tehran saying, we're going to respond. So this is, at least initially, to me, this is good news. Despite 2 soldiers being killed, despite some military sites being hit by the Israelis, I think right now that Iran would rather not enter or rather respond again against the Israelis. So, but we have to remember, this is very, very important here, that Iran is still in a war or a conflict with Israel. But what it's doing is using its proxies, right? Its proxies in Lebanon, or its network of clients in Lebanon, again in Gaza, in the West Bank, the Houthis in Yemen, Iraqi militias. So, Iran is and continues to be in conflict with Israel, but it's just not. It's done via proxy. We're at least anticipating. I am anticipating at least that we're not going to see Iran directly respond against Israel. So that at least that's the hope now.
And for folks out there who have been following kind of bits and pieces of this, we talk a lot about the fact that Hamas and Hezbollah are proxies of Iran. But again, for folks out there, can you kind of explain, give an overall view of what that really means?
Sure. So essentially what Iran does, either they established armed organizations throughout the region, or they support existing armed organizations. And in this case, specifically when it comes to Israel, there are many terrorist organizations on Israel's borders. So we have Hamas in the Gaza Strip, Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip, and many other armed organizations that have received not only financial support from Iran, but also military support to attack Israel. And the same thing, of course, with Hezbollah in Lebanon. There's other armed groups in Syria, of course, Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and their main target, the main target of these organizations, or the goal of these organizations, is to simply attack Israel, right? So that's why we've seen, for example, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, drones fired by the Houthis in Yemen, again, who are backed by Iran. They've been firing at Israel over the past year. So these organizations, what they're doing is what Iran is doing through these organizations is pressuring the Israelis, right? And this is what Iran does. They'd rather attack Israel on the cheap, rather with proxies, than directly attack Israel with ballistic missiles. So this is what they've not only been doing for last year, but they've been doing this for many years.
We've talked about the classified documents leak that happened about a week ago now at this point. Do we know if that played any role in the timing of this retaliatory attack by Israel on Iran, or if it played any role really in any of it?
Right. Well, it depends, right? There's a lot of reports out there that have said that it did delay the attack. It is certainly possible. I think the document that was released, mentioned some weapons and some Israeli Air Force activity. So it's definitely possible. But as we saw last night, the Israelis, they were able to penetrate Iran's air defense system. I think they were able to hit the strikes, rather the targets that they wanted to. So I think they did achieve all their goals. So despite this leak, right, the Israelis were able to get in, do the job, and at least according to the Israeli Defense Forces, all the planes returned home. So it was successful. So I think this leak probably was something the Israelis would have rather not have seen come out to the public, but in the end, it didn't matter because the Israelis were successful.
Is it now kind of just a waiting game, so to speak, as we see what does happen next?
Yes. Again, like I mentioned before, the problem here is that Iran is still in a conflict with Israel via its proxies. So there is a possibility here that we may see in the near future, especially as long as this current war is going on, that Israel and Iran may enter into another round of direct attacks. So we have to remember here, in one of the cases, I think it was back in April, the first Iranian ballistic missile attack against the Israelis happened because the Israelis were targeting IRGC generals in Syria, in Damascus. And a lot of that had to do with weapons transfers to Hezbollah in Lebanon. So and there's other examples and other reasons as well. So I think the possibility is still there, especially if these Iran's proxies continue to attack Israel, continue to transfer weapons to Lebanon, to Hezbollah. But however, at this moment, or at least in the near future, I'm anticipating that there won't be a direct Iranian-Israel conflict.
All right. Joe Truzman there with the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's Long War Journal. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. Anything else you want to add really about any of this before I let you go?
I think if there is a ceasefire in Gaza, especially now after the killing of Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, if there is a ceasefire, you will very likely see a calming of the other fronts, right? Lebanon, Iran, Yemen. So we'll have to see, and we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But again, hopefully, maybe there's a ceasefire and we can see a calming of the situation here in the region. So we'll just have to see in the next days and weeks.
And before I let you go, you bring up a good point there. I want to ask you, because we know that the CIA director, as well as the Mossad director, they're all going to be there in Doha starting tomorrow. Are we any closer to actually seeing a ceasefire hostage release deal now that Sinwar is dead? Have we inched closer as a result of that?
I think it's definitely possible. Listen, I think Sinwar was an obstacle to the ceasefire. If you believe the reports, some of the reports that have emerged over the last weeks, Sinwar was holding out essentially, right? Sinwar was holding out on a ceasefire and didn't want to agree to a ceasefire. And now that he's been eliminated, that obstacle is gone. And I also think that after all the Israeli operations in recent weeks and months against the so-called Iran-led axis of resistance, we've seen, obviously Hezbollah's Secretary General or Chief Hassan Nasrallah and much of its leadership been killed by Israel. I think it's time. I think the Iranians realize, I think Hezbollah, Hamas, all these organizations that are allied with each other, I think they see the writing on the wall here, that it's probably time for a ceasefire. And now with the obstacle removed that Sinwar, I think it's possible here. So, which may spell a lot of good news for the region. So again, we'll just wait and see what happens after these meetings. So a lot of important dates coming up. So we'll see what happens.
All right, Joe Truzman, thank you again for being here with us and helping to break it down. We appreciate it.
Thank you.